Live Network. This is Open Line.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Open Line. It's definitely been a tough weekend, and I'm glad you're with us. We're going to tackle some tough topics today. We are talking about where we are right now, the path forward, and some solutions. Certainly, again, it's been a very tough weekend. Very happy to have with us via Zoom, once again, Ashford Hughes. He was with the mayor's office. He is now an equity, diversity, and inclusion consultant. And also Lonnell Matthews. He's with Davidson County Juvenile Court Clerk. Thank you both for being with us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having us, man.
All right. A terrible weekend, really. And we're going through a terrible time in this country, and I want to be able to talk about it openly on this show. And so, Ashford, let me start with you. Kind of, how have we gotten to this point, and where do we go forward? I mean, that question is so broad, but how do we go forward from where we are, and where do you see, I guess, that we are right now?
I first want to speak the names in solidarity of Brother George Floyd, Sister Breonna Taylor, here close to home, Brother Daniel Hambert, Brother Jacquees Clemens, and speak in unity that the anger and the frustration that we feel for those families that have lost loved ones. I come today speaking to you as a proud Black man, a strong Black man, and an empowered Black man during this time. As we look around, we feel the anger, we see the frustration in our community. But where I am and where I'm going to lead off from here is turning that anger, turning that frustration into public policy, turning it into action so that our communities have justice, so that our community has an opportunity to enhance its quality of life. There was a French social philosopher named Frantz Fanon. He coined this phrase almost 60 years ago. We revolt simply because, for many reasons, we can no longer breathe. When we talk about what happened with Brother Floyd in Minnesota, but we look around, African Americans in this country, literally and figuratively, are screaming out, "I cannot breathe." We currently are being choked by the school to prison pipeline. We currently are being choked by a lack of affordable housing. We currently are being choked by a lack of equity and economics within our community. We currently are being choked by a systematic, racial, oppressive system that we live in on a day-to-day basis. And it's important that we know the why that people are in the streets and why people from coast to coast are protesting, peacefully protesting for justice, for racial equity. That is part of the reason why people are screaming out and want to be heard. And the how is what we need to be focused on next. People are telling you what they want. We want to make certain that policing reform takes place. We want to make certain that our Black-owned businesses have access to capital. We want to make certain that our school children go to school and have access to digital opportunities to enhance their school education. We want to make certain that our communities have access to housing and our communities are no longer gentrified to the point where we're displaced. That is what people are fighting for and what we want.
Lonnell,
now, how we get that? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, yeah, I want to turn to Lonnell. I mean, I think that really lays it out there perfectly. And Lonnell, I want to ask you, as you have watched what has happened over the past several days, weeks, what do you think? I mean, you heard what Ashford Hughes said there. What do you think about where we are right now?
Yeah, thanks, Ben. I'm glad that Ashford acknowledged some of the individuals that have been victims of incidents that have brought us to this point in this country. But I want to take it further back and just talk about the trajectory of Black people in this country. If you and I'm surprised that I have to explain it this way, and I can't really take for granted that people are just supposed to know this, because we haven't really taught American history in this way. But Black people they were trafficked, they were taken out of Africa, they were brought to this country and enslaved. And if you think about the transition from slavery to today, we ended slavery and we replaced it with segregation. And once you ended slavery, you ended having slave masters, but you replaced the slave masters with policing in communities that were communities of color, over policing in communities of color. You end segregation, quote unquote, and you replace it with discrimination, hidden discrimination, or what we call institutional racism. And Ashford kind of referenced some of this in what he said. But in all of this, you have to understand that Black people have always felt like we have never been whole in America. And that's an important statement to make. We have always had this unique relationship with people of other races in this country. And sometimes it's uncomfortable. Sometimes it's open, it's authentic, but oftentimes it's not. Oftentimes we feel very uncomfortable in the rooms that we sit in and the circles. No matter our position or our title, we tend to feel uncomfortable because of the history of this country and the fact that this country really hasn't acknowledged that history publicly and formally, and that the country has not really taken steps to provide restitution and atonement for what has been done to Black people.
So how do we go? I guess how do we go forward? And I'll ask each of you that. And we see the topic on the bottom here, the fear of Black men in America. I'm looking at an article that talks about fear of Black men in public spaces. I asked you all if you'd seen it. You said you lived it. And so I want to get to that. But based on what you all both just said, so where do we go from here? And Ashford, you said a few things, but I think there are people out there that would acknowledge everything you've said is right. But what do we do? What do we do about it? How do these protests really lead to change? And Ashford, I'll start with you.
I mean, for me, I'll repeat it again. It's going, for me, the way that I'm going to lead in this moment and the way that I'm going to organize people in this moment is around public policy. Right now in Nashville, we have the tools locally to be able to change some of the trajectory of where we're going, but we can no longer continue to stay ahistorical in the work that was progress because we haven't pushed it further along enough. As I was chief diversity officer within the city of Metro, I devised a 8-point equity platform that the city, based on city data, that we could utilize and implement moving forward to address what the community was saying. And oftentimes we forget the community has told us years and decades before what the solutions are. But will government, will our leaders in business, nonprofit, and philanthropy listen is the question. So I'm going to continue to push those things forward right now within our equity platform. Metro Nashville also issued a connected cities document that talked about how do we connect better as a city along the lines of technology, along the lines of equity, along the lines of racial opportunities, so that people in our city don't have to be without. We have to implement the public policies that we have created with data and move forward.
And so, yeah, there is that. Those proposals are out there, and that's good. Lonnell Matthews, what do you think? Will these protests, will all the stuff that we're seeing right now, do you feel like it's going to make a difference?
Ben, to be honest, we're not going to see any change until this country, like I said, fully acknowledges the history of disparaging treatment of Black people, and that this country takes the next step of restitution and atonement. And that looks different. There's different issues to talk about in that, and Ashford has brought some of them up. But you have to go from protest to starting to take some of that action. And so when you talk about Black people, we have been underfunded, we've been undereducated, we've been underdiagnosed, we've underhoused, we're undertreated, we're under-resourced. And you think about the few places where we're over in this country, over-policed. And those are just a couple of policy points that you could start talking about. You could start talking about police reform. You could start talking about housing reform in this country. You could start talking about education reform. I want to see every executive branch at every level of government, municipal, state, and federal, acknowledge that Black people have a disparaging history in this country. Acknowledge slavery and what it did to Black people. Acknowledge Jim Crowism, acknowledge segregation, acknowledge these things, but also be willing to take the step of providing restitution. What does that look like? I don't have all the answers. I don't think anyone does, Ben. You mentioned that we started on some of those things. Starting is not enough. We need to follow through and make sure that we complete some of these things. Why are our kids having to pay to go to college? Start there with reparations. Make college free for Black kids. Any college in this country. That's where you could start. That's one place you could start. Let's start talking about all the property that government owns in this country and start talking about how we provide access and opportunity for Black people to access that property, to own that property, to possess that property, to build businesses on that property, to build communities. These are the conversations that we as Black people want to hear, especially from our government leaders.
But those conversations, I'm not hearing anything like that. Those conversations. And so I guess, do you feel like things are getting worse? And is that part of what has led to all of the frustration? Or is the frustration just that it never gets better? I mean, obviously we've had 3 horrible videos: the George Floyd video in Minnesota, the woman in Central Park, the Ahmaud Arbery video. Those 3 videos coming back to back to back really kind of just maybe set all of this off. But do you feel like we're going backward, or is the frustration we're not going forward fast enough? And Ashford, I'll start with you on that.
Ben, I think it's a combination, but you also have to take a step back again, and before I go to forward, look at the history. When you look at the history of Black people, melanated people across the globe that have been oppressed, not just in America, but in Brazil, in Europe, this has been in Africa. When you talk about fighting for freedom, when you talk about fighting for Black liberation, it doesn't happen overnight. Unfortunately, I believe the partners that Lonnell and I have been working with, whether they're the Equity Alliance, Gideon's Army, other people, the REAL program with Oasis, people recognize this is going to be a long haul. The civil rights movement, when Rosa Parks, when they started the Montgomery bus boycott, it took 10 years for them to be able to move on civil rights legislation, and another year after that to get voting rights legislation. This is a long haul. So yes, there is absolute frustration. There is anger within the community around what's not happening, why it's not happening, and why are people not listening. But again, we have to hold pat and continue to organize amongst each other and hold our elected officials accountable to move in a manner that we need to move into. Now, what's going to be different now, what we hope and what we are moving forward difference now, is that our white allies, that our brown allies come to strongly support this effort. That they not only come in to support us, but they lead with their voices in the boardroom. They lead with their voices on Metro Council to support what the Black-led organizations who are close to the ground, what those folks that have been fighting for equity and policy have been fighting for the last decade or more. That is where we're asking our allies to step in, to step up, to lean in, and to lead up to help move this process forward. We have the mentality, we have the knowledge capital in organizing within this city. We have the public policy that has been created. Where we need, Ben, we need the leaders to dig in. This is our Diane Nash moment right now. We need our leaders and our white allies, our brown allies to lean in right now and support this movement, and do not yield until we get what we want, which is Black liberation, and make certain we get black equity within this city moving forward.
Black equity within this city. So what you're talking about on some level is a city situation. Lonnell, I mean, so you hear what Ashford Hughes there is saying. Do you feel like you're getting that kind of buy-in, or we're falling short, or what do you think?
So I agree completely with what Ashford says. I think that, you know, our white allies have supported us in the past, but they've done so limited. And I don't want to say it's been inauthentic, but it comes across as charity. We're not looking for charity. We're looking for empowerment of black people. We want black people to feel empowered to improve their lives, to live the American dream. When you talk about the American dream and what that looks like in this country, we want black people empowered. Someone said to me that black life matters, but black lives don't. You know, white people have consumed black culture in this country. They've actually taken black culture, they've wrapped it up, they put it in music, and they put it in film, and they own the production companies, and they love that culture. They embrace that culture, but the black lives that create that culture aren't as valued as the culture is. And that's a problem in this country. When you talk about white allies needing to stand up, that includes the Democratic Party. I'm a Democrat. I've been a lifelong Democrat. But black people historically have not always been Democrats. The Republican Party is for the large part of the black community, our ex that we never want to get back with. If you've ever been in a relationship and you have that ex. But our current relationship with the Democratic Party, our current relationship is starting to reflect our ex in some ways. They haven't really stepped up for black issues like they have for LGBTQ issues, for Latino issues and immigration issues. Black issues are just as important and have been in this country longer than those other issues. They've been around, and those issues haven't been addressed. And that's where you're starting to see some of the frustrations, Dan. You can have a black man get killed on the yard of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, and we probably would see the same type of routine that would occur afterwards. We have to really change that routine. We have to change what happens afterwards. And that means we could protest, we could march, we could rally, but we can't let this die down. We can't let this go away without saying we're going to take some action. And there are actions to be taken.
That's the question. How does this keep going? And how does something positive come from it? That's kind of the most important question. And did you want to add something, Ashford?
Yeah, I'm going to tell you, one of the positive things that's going to come out of this is that we, as African Americans, as leaders within this city, we're going to take back the narrative, and we're going to define what our narrative is and what our peace and what our space is in this city. And what I mean by that is we don't condone violence. Let me say that again. We don't condone violence. But to spend multiple days and hours talking about what happened over this weekend, about the violence, rather than the organizers that orchestrated a peaceful protest, I get that we don't want the buildings to burn. We don't want glass broken downtown. But I want those people that were just as outraged about that to be just as outraged that I can't afford to live in North Nashville anymore. I want those people to be just as outraged about the breaking of glass as they am that my wealth gap, that I have not, as a black group of individuals, we have not decreased the wealth gap in this country over the last 50 years. I want folks to be angry, just as angry that my life was snubbed out. People's lives by our own police department have been snubbed out by individual bad cops. I want folks to understand and recognize in this process, we are not talking about individuals. We are not talking about that one or those two individual cops that did this bad thing. We are not talking about those one or two individuals that did this racist thing. We are talking about a system. We are here to disrupt the system in order to have what Dr. King called and create a beloved community for everyone. That's not happening. Something good is going to come out of this, Ben. Something good is going to come out of this. because when you're down there, when you're in the mines and you're building stuff, diamonds come out. And we're going to make a diamond, and we're going to make certain that our community is heard, and we're going to pass public policy here soon in the short term, and pass public policy coming out of COVID that is going to be conducive to our equity within this city and within this state especially.
Lonnell, I'll ask you, then we'll go to break. Ashford said take the narrative back. How much do you think the property damage, not just in Nashville, but that's taking place all over, is hurting this moment? Or is it something that is needed to get people's attention and the focus, I guess? What do you think about the property damage and its impact on what is the goal here?
Well, like Ashford said, I don't condone the property damage and the violence either, but I understand it, Ben. I think to really understand the frustration of Black people in this country, you have to bring yourself to being open to understanding it. If you value that property, if you value things that can be rebuilt over lives that can't be relived, then we have a fundamental problem in this country. And that's when Ashford talks about taking back the narrative. That is what he's talking about. We could rebuild those buildings. We could put windows back in, but George Floyd will never talk to his family again. And that is an issue. That is an issue when his life was taken on camera in front of the entire world to see. That is an issue with this country, and we have to go back to our value. It's really a value proposition, Ben. We have to go back to American values. Are American values that we value those buildings over life? And that answer is going to be different for everyone in this country. But until we all reach consensus that Black people matter just as much as white people, as Asian people, as Latino people, that we are truly all in this together, that America is the melting pot that our forefathers founded this country to be, which I think is somewhat hypocritical because of the things that they were allowing in the founding of the country. But I believe in American values. If we believe in those values, we have to start living those values. And that's where we're going to see the change come. If we really want to see policy changes, as we've talked about, we want to see people take action steps, they have to come to acknowledge and accept that, yes, we have not done enough. And this is not a partisan problem. People want to make it a partisan problem. The Republicans are the problem. They're not. Democrats have been in power before in this country, and we still have not changed these policies that have been in place for centuries.
Yeah, you're talking about a fundamental change here. Fundamental change.
We have to be honest with ourselves, Ben.
Right.
We do.
All right, we're going to take a break. We'll come back, continue the discussion. We'll take some phone calls. If you want to call in, there's the number, 615-737-PLUS, 615-737-7587. Take a break. Be back right after this.